I want to get a few questions out so that everyone understands your circumstance.
Yes, okay, so we have 7 children between the ages of 1 and 12.
And you said your oldest is 12?
Mm-hmm.
Does your 12-year-old get an allowance?
Yes,
How much does he get?
$6 a week.
And what does it cover?
Anything extra that he wants, and he usually has to pay half of a birthday gift if we're getting a birthday gift for one of his friends. Or anything over $5, he pays.
Does he have any interest in money?
Yeah, he takes his rake and goes around the neighborhood and rakes people's lawns.
So he makes money.
Mhm.
What's the difference between the allowance you give him and the money that he earns by raking, in terms of the principle of what an allowance is?
Well, for allowance, I expect all the kids to do certain things, and I don't base their allowance on not
So
doing it.
you're not paying him the allowance to do things?
No,
Why do you give him the allowance?
to learn how to manage money.
Did y'all hear that? He knows how to earn money. He knows that he has to earn money to get money, but he doesn't know how to manage money. And she gives him money to learn how to manage money, as well as he earns money. Those are two different processes. There's an advantage to giving a 12-year-old an allowance besides the fact that he's learning how to manage money, and that is that you get leverage over him. Because now he has money to pay fines with. And if he can't pay fines if he doesn't have an income. If he has an income, then he can pay a fine. And so the first thing I want to do is to work on liability and performing the little tasks that he's supposed to be doing, things like that. I'm not paying him to do these things. I'm fining him for failing to do it, because he's already getting paid. The payment is in the allowance. The allowance is not, it's not earning it. Allowance, you get allowance because you need the money. You get a salary because you earned it. It's a difference. When I was in the Army, I was a captain in the medical corps, and this resulted in me, I got a paycheck every 2 weeks, and the paycheck said on it so-and-so salary, and the salary was broken down, and then it said so-and-so allowance, and the allowance was broken down, and there was a total amount of money, and that was my paycheck. What it said about salary was it had to do with me being a captain. All captains in the Army get the same amount of money. Had to be with me being also a doctor, and doctors get an extra amount of money in the Army. And so I got this plus that, and that was what was called my salary. And then I got allowances, and allowance was like uniform allowance. Same amount of money every month, wasn't much, because I didn't have to buy uniforms once a week, but every now and then you had to get some more uniform, and that's what the money was for. It was so that you didn't have the excuse of saying I didn't have the money to have a uniform. Everybody in the Army's got to have a uniform. The Army says they'll pay for the uniform. That's how they pay for it. They give you a uniform allowance. You can spend your uniform allowance on something stupid if you want to, but then you're going to get in trouble if you don't have a uniform. That's why they give you the uniform allowance. Housing allowance, travel allowance, all these things are part of a paycheck. So, in your child's state, for instance, he makes a wage raking, but he also gets an allowance for certain things. Now, the allowance right now is not being used for things that will someday be his responsibility, and it's time to start moving toward that if you are so inclined. It's the way I did it with my children at this age. I remember how it started with my daughter, when she was about his age, would come home from probably 6th or 7th grade and kick off her shoes and go out back and shoot baskets that are built on the asphalt in front of the garage. And my wife would say, I'd come home and she'd complain about Julie shooting basketballs outside by kicking her shoes off, because she was, at that point, started wearing pantyhose. Now, look, I know almost nothing about pantyhose. I didn't even know what we were talking about yet. And she said, she wears out her pantyhose because she doesn't put any shoes on, she just goes outside in her pantyhose and shoots baskets. And I said, and so she said, well, pantyhose are expensive. I said, well, how long are they supposed to last? And she told me. I said, what do they cost? And she told me. I said, well, how long does hers last? And she told me. I said, well, that's ridiculous. So I said, well, let's figure out how many pantyhose she's supposed to have in, I don't know, how long they last, I don't know. I don't even remember anymore. A few weeks or a month or two, or I don't know, whatever it was. I'm a guy, what do I know about it? But anyways, whatever it is. I said, okay, let's buy her a certain supply of pantyhose. It'll last her for this period of time. And we'll break it down in her allowance. That every 2 weeks, she gets this amount of money, and this is for pantyhose, and this is all the pantyhose we're buying. I don't care if she shoots basket in her pantyhose or not, but this is all pantyhose I'm buying. She can have holes in her pantyhose if she wants to, but if she doesn't want to have holes in her pantyhose, she knows what to do about it, and we're not going to talk about it further. That ended it, because she had enough sense to realize if she's going to be buying her own pantyhose now. And this brings up a whole nother principle that's worth going into that I learned when I was a child. I should say I didn't learn it when I was a child. If I'd been smart, I would have learned it as a child. I learned it years later looking back on it. I was one of 4 brothers. My mother would make sandwiches for all of us and put a handful of potato chips on each plate and put the bag of potato chips on the table. As soon as everybody sat down, everyone would eat whatever was on their plate, and then the fight for the bag of the potato chips started. Right? Except for one of us. And I saw him do this, and I never saw what it meant, but he did it. But he sat there, and the whole time we were eating our potato chips, he was eating out of the bag. And when the fight for the bag started, he had his pile of potato chips still on his plate to eat. He got far more potato chips than the rest of us. And the lesson of that is you'll eat somebody else's potato chips more than you'll eat your own. Now, children don't have any insight into the cost of things. And they can't get the insight unless they actually are spending the money on it. You don't understand what things cost because you have to go buy stuff. My wife is all upset about how much the pantyhose cost, but my daughter didn't give a hoot about it. She wasn't buying pantyhose. As soon as she had to buy pantyhose with her money, all of a sudden, the whole thing was gone. Because it was her money that was buying the pantyhose now. And she'd have to think about whether she wanted to be wasting her money on more pantyhose or not. Now, this is an advantage to you all, if you would like to do this, would be to give him specific allotments for this or for that in his allowance, and increase his allowance. As you do this, add a little bit more and say, this is for maturity. Now, the point is this, I'm not buying this thing. This is not new money for me. This is money I'm already spending on you. It's just that you got it now, not me. If you don't spend it for this, you will not have this anymore. I would not do this in a blanket way. I would do it for stuff that is so important to him, I know he'd spend the money for it. Some kids have nothing like this, by the way. But some kids are really careful about this. They really care about it, and they really do want to have control of the money. And you can start with some children fairly young with this kind of idea. But I would say most teenagers ought to already be on an allowance, and the allowance ought to be increasing, and they should be taking more and more responsibility for the way they spend their money. And you get out of it. You just back out of it. You fund it, and you back out of it. Meanwhile, they have the money to pay you back when they fail. And what you do then is you keep some kind of a record, and you give them a ticket on Saturday when you give them their allowance. You can say, this is for not making up your bed. I did that with Julie one time. Julie failed to make up her bed, and my wife came and told me and said, don't worry about it, I'll make it up. And I went in her room and made up her bed. I didn't say anything to Julie about it till allowance on Saturday. And when I gave her allowance on Saturday, I gave her a bill for $20. Because doctors are expensive if you want work room service. Room service from doctors is going to really cost you. And that's all I said to her. I said, this is for room service, $20. Which was most of the allowance. At that, I think she was 15 or something like that. You know, teenagers get expensive, they get more and more expensive. You're spending the money on them anyway, you might as well give it to them, let them learn how to use it. Meanwhile, you can use this to your advantage. If you get them to wear it, they work just like you do. You do things in a day because you don't want to have to pay the price if you don't do it. All of us do this, but it's because we have paid the price, we've had the experience of paying the price, we don't want to pay the price, and so that's why we do it. And I would spend a lot of time on working with the 12-year-old and cultivating this idea of